She only wanted one drink to forget her broken marriage, but that single glass of whiskey would lead her into a world of lies, betrayal, and a billionaire's dangerous love. The rain hammered relentlessly against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Diana Vale's corner office, blurring the city skyline into a wash of gray shadows and neon streaks. The storm had a rhythm, a steady pounding that echoed the chaos inside her chest. On her mahogany desk lay a scattering of papers, their stark black lettering slashing across white like wounds she couldn't stop reopening. Divorce papers, official, clinical, and cold, yet each line carried the weight of 10 years of promises turned to ash. At 32, Diana had everything she thought she wanted. The youngest marketing executive to climb to her position, the woman colleagues envied for her sharp intellect and enviable corner office, the one who never faltered during presentations or negotiations. Her discipline and drive had carried her through every challenge, but tonight, all of it seemed meaningless, trophies sitting on a hollow shelf. She stared at the heavy gold frame on her desk that once held a wedding photo, the glass now cracked from the day she hurled it against the wall. Her mind betrayed her with flashes of memory. Marcus, his easy smile and whispered reassurances, a man she thought she could trust with her life. Rebecca, her business partner and closest friend, holding Diana's veil steady on her wedding day, laughing as they practiced speeches for each other's big pitches. The betrayal had been more than a knife. It was a systematic dismantling of her very foundation. To find them together, her husband and her best friend, wasn't just an affair. It was a declaration that everything she had believed in had been a carefully staged illusion. 3 months had passed since that night, yet the sting felt fresh. Marcus still sent messages, hollow apologies, and half-hearted explanations, each one left unread on her phone. Rebecca had disappeared into silence, except for the occasional cruel reminder when Diana glimpsed photos online of the two of them together, smiling like a future she had once been promised. The office, once her sanctuary, now felt like a prison. Every success echoed back at her as proof she could conquer the professional world, but what use was it if she couldn't even guard her own heart? She leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes against the burn of tears she refused to let fall here. Not in this office, not in front of the city that thought she was unshakable. The clock read 8:47 p.m. Most of the building had long since emptied, leaving her alone with the storm and her ghosts. Returning to her apartment meant confronting silence, the kind that screamed with memories, Marcus's laughter in the kitchen, Rebecca's voice on speakerphone as they plotted campaigns late into the night. The silence was worse than the storm. She shoved the papers into her briefcase and snapped it shut with a force that startled even her. She needed something, anything to dull the ache. A drink strong enough to blur the edges of memory. The Crimson Lounge was only 3 blocks away, an upscale haven for people who wanted to disappear in luxury and low light. The rain had softened to a drizzle by the time she stepped onto the pavement. Her heels clicked against the wet concrete, each step an act of defiance against the storm inside her. The city glowed under the mist, reflections stretching like fractured dreams. The lounge was as she remembered, amber lighting casting everything in a golden haze, the scent of aged whiskey and polished leather mingling with the soft croon of a jazz saxophone. She chose a seat at the far end of the mahogany bar, away from the soft laughter of couples leaning to. Oh, close. She wanted the solitude of shadows, the anonymity of being just another woman with a glass in hand. Whiskey neat, she told the bartender, her voice steadier than she felt. Make it a double. The glass burned as it touched her lips, the warmth sliding down her throat like fire. For the first time all evening, she felt something other than numbness. And then, just as the comfort began to settle, a voice, deep, smooth, with a weight that drew attention, spoke from her left. Rough day at the office? Diana turned, and her heart stumbled. A pair of striking green eyes met hers, sharp yet softened by an intensity she couldn't name. The man who sat beside her was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a charcoal suit that whispered wealth and power. His dark hair was slightly tousled, as though he had been running his hands through it in frustration. There was something magnetic in the way he occupied the space, as though he didn't just sit at the bar, but commanded it. For the first time in months, Diana felt her pulse quicken, not from anger or grief, but from the awareness that she was being seen. The bartender's quiet hum faded into the background as Diana studied the stranger beside her. His presence was unsettling in the most curious way, not threatening, but magnetic, like standing too close to a fire. She told herself to look away, to finish her whiskey and disappear into the night, but the green-eyed man didn't give her the chance. Adrien Cross, he said simply, extending a hand as though she ought to know who he was. And she did. Everyone in the city knew the name, Billionaire, visionary, the man behind Cross Industries, an empire that had reshaped technology and power. A man whose life seemed untouchable, a constant subject of glossy magazine spreads and whispered speculation. Yet here he was, in the dim corner of the Crimson Lounge, offering his hand as though he were just another patron seeking company. Diana's lips parted in surprise. "Diana Vale," she said, shaky. Nang his hand. Electricity darted through her at his touch, sharp enough to make her pulse falter. "Vale," Adrien repeated, his voice lingering on her name. "The Diana Vale? Harrison campaign, yes?" His gaze sharpened with something like recognition. She blinked. You know my work?" "I make it my business to know the people who move industries forward," Adrien said, gesturing subtly for the bartender to refresh her drink. "Your strategy increased Harrison's market share by 40% in 6 months. Innovation like that doesn't go unnoticed." For the first time in months, warmth replaced the hollow ache in Diana's chest. He wasn't looking at her with pity, like colleagues whispering about her divorce. He wasn't treating her as broken glass. He was speaking to her as if she still mattered, because of her mind, her ability, not her failures. "And what brings Adrien Cross to a place like this?" she asked, finding her footing again in the banter. "Shouldn't you be running empires from behind polished glass walls?" Adrien's smile was faint, tinged with sadness. "Same reason you're here, I imagine. Success doesn't always fill the empty spaces." Something in the way he said it stirred her. She searched his face for irony, but his eyes were shadowed, haunted in a way she recognized all too well. For a moment, the lounge around them seemed to vanish, leaving only the two of them in a quiet pocket of truth. They talked. Hours slipped by unnoticed, whiskey glasses refilled and forgotten, words spilling between them with a strange, effortless rhythm. Adrien spoke not as a billionaire recluse, but as a man carrying invisible weights. He told her of the loneliness that came with being admired but never understood, the paranoia of loyalty in a world where everyone wanted something. And Diana, who had spent months choking on silence, found herself confessing fears she had never voiced aloud. Her dreams of building her own agency, her terror of failing again, her humiliation at Marcus's betrayal. Adrien listened, not with pity, but with intent, as though each word she spoke carried value. His quiet intensity unnerved her, but in a way that made her feel alive for the first time in months. At one point he leaned closer, his voice lowering into something meant only for her. "You know what I find fascinating about people like us? We tell ourselves we're running towards something better, but truthfully, we're all just running from something." Diana's heart thudded. "And what are you running from, Mr. Cross?" His eyes darkened, something raw flashing across them. "The same thing you are," he murmured. "The fear that maybe we're not as strong as everyone believes." The words stole her breath. Adrien Cross, untouchable, untamed, always one headline away from myth, was admitting to weakness. And she, shattered and stitched together by sheer will, recognized herself in him. The attraction between them was no longer subtle. It was a force in the air, a current that threatened to pull them both under. Diana's heart screamed caution, but her body leaned closer as if drawn by gravity. "I should go," she whispered, her resolve trembling. "Should," Adrien replied softly, his gaze burning into hers, "and want are two very different things. What do you want, Diana?" Her breath caught. For months, he had felt nothing but numbness. But staring into those green eyes, she felt alive, aching, dangerous, real. "I want," her voice trembled as she admitted it, "I want to feel alive again." Adrien stood, extending his hand. His smile was faint but certain. "Then come with me." Diana hesitated for a single heartbeat. Then, with a recklessness she had buried under years of caution, she placed her hand in his. The lounge's golden haze faded as they stepped into the cool night air. Adrien's driver opened the door of a sleek black sedan, and in moments they were gliding through the city, away from the noise and into something neither of them could name. Each turn of the car deepened the suspense. Diana didn't know whether she was stepping into salvation or ruin, only that she couldn't look away. When the elevator doors of Adrien's skyscraper penthouse opened, the view of the glittering city stretched before her like a promise, and Diana knew her life was about to change in ways she couldn't yet imagine. The elevator ride to the top of the tower felt eternal, yet too short. Diana stood beside Adrien, the soft hum of the lift a poor mask for the crackling energy between them. Her heart thudded so loudly she was certain he could hear it. She gripped the strap of her bag like a lifeline, telling herself this was insane. She didn't know him. She shouldn't trust him, but she had already stepped off the cliff, and gravity was doing the rest. When the doors finally slid open, Diana gasped. Adrien's penthouse unfolded like a world out of reach for ordinary mortals. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the city sprawled like jewels across black velvet, modern art splashed with defiance on pristine walls, furniture sculpted rather than built. It was wealth made tangible, intimidating and breathtaking all at once. "It's incredible," she murmured, stepping toward the glass. Rain streaks still clung to the windows, refracting the city lights into diamonds. Adrien moved behind her, his presence a heat she could feel even without touch. "It's just a place," he said quietly. "It's the company that makes it matter." The words slid into her, unsettling. She turned, finding herself closer to him than she had intended. His cologne, something dark, woodsy, and maddeningly intoxicating, wrapped around her senses. His eyes studied her not like a man appraising a conquest, but like one searching for something familiar in a stranger. Her pulse raced. "This is wrong," a voice inside her whispered. "You don't know him. You can't afford another mistake." But another voice, the one that had been starved for touch, for being seen, whispered louder, "What if this isn't a mistake?" Adrien's hands came up slowly, hesitantly, cupping her face as though she were fragile glass. "Are you sure about this?" His voice was a rasp, barely audible, but it carried the weight of choice. Instead of words, Diana let action answer. She rose onto her toes, pressing her lips to his. The kiss was not polite, not tentative. It was fire breaking through ice, months of loneliness cracking open all at once. Adrien responded with a hunger that matched her own, but his touch was careful, reverent. The city stretched beneath them like a witness as they stumbled toward his bedroom. Every moment was both desperate and delicate. His hands mapped the contours of her back. Hers tangled in his hair, and somewhere between their gasps and whispers, she realized this wasn't just lust. It was two broken souls clinging to each other as if touch alone could mend fractures. When they finally collapsed together, it wasn't simply passion. It was release. It was rage, grief, desire, and hope, all colliding. Adrien's intensity surprised her, his strength tempered with gentleness, his focus wholly on her, as if the rest of the world no longer existed. Later, they lay tangled in silk sheets, the glow of the city wrapping them in quiet brilliance. Diana's cheek rested on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Adrien's fingers traced idle patterns across her shoulder, his expression unreadable in the faint light. "What happens now?" she whispered, the question trembling between fear and longing. Adrien pressed a kiss into her hair. "Now," he said softly, "we see if lightning can strike twice." Diana closed her eyes. For the first time since Marcus's betrayal, hope seeped through her defenses. Yet even in the warmth of Adrien's arms, unease curled in her stomach, because lightning, she knew, never came without the storm. And somewhere deep inside, she felt the storm was already gathering. The morning after felt like a dream Diana wasn't ready to wake from. Sunlight poured through Adrien's glass walls, painting the city in hues of gold and steel. He appeared in the doorway with 2 mugs of coffee, his shirt crisp, his green eyes startlingly gentle. For a fleeting moment, it seemed simple, 2 people finding comfort in each other. But simplicity was a luxury Diana had long since stopped believing in. By the 3rd day, she was standing in the gleaming lobby of Cross Industries, a badge clipped to her blazer, her new office high above the city. The offer had been irresistible. Creative control, resources beyond imagining, a salary that turned her head. But as she stepped into the chrome and glass kingdom Adrien had built, unease lingered. This wasn't just a job. This was stepping into his world, a world where every move would be scrutinized. At first, it was intoxicating. Her first campaign, bold, disruptive, laced with her signature ingenuity, caught fire across the industry. Her team admired her precision, her ability to inspire. Adrien stopped by her office more than once, a quiet smile curving his lips when he saw her command the room. For weeks, she felt like she had clawed her way out of hell and found not just redemption, but purpose. But shadows crept quickly in kingdoms this high. It started with silence, conversations that stopped when she entered a room, averted eyes in meetings, the subtle hum of distrust that spread like smoke. Diana brushed it off at first as the natural resistance of executives to a newcomer, especially one who had arrived at the arm of the company's enigmatic CEO. But the whispers grew teeth. Reports she had submitted came back riddled with errors she knew weren't hers. Meetings were rescheduled without her knowledge. Emails disappeared from her inbox. It wasn't incompetence. It was sabotage. The source revealed itself in a boardroom 6 weeks into her tenure. The meeting had been routine until Harold Blackwood, CFO and Adrien's longtime partner, leaned forward with a predator's calm, his steel-gray eyes locked on Diana as though she were a trespasser. "These projections," he said, his voice slick with disdain, "seem overly optimistic. Perhaps our new marketing director needs more time to understand how we operate here." Diana held her ground, though heat rose in her cheeks. "The projections are supported by market analysis and early performance indicators. Every recommendation is backed by data." The corner of Harold's mouth twitched, the faintest sneer. Before she could continue, Adrien's voice cut through the tension, low but edged with warning. "Diana's track record speaks for itself. Her campaigns have already exceeded our expectations." The meeting moved on, but the message lingered like poison. Harold Blackwood was not just unconvinced, he was hostile. That evening, Diana cornered Adrien in his office. "What's his problem with me?" Adrien leaned against his desk, eyes shadowed. "Harold has been with me since the beginning. Sometimes he forgets the company isn't just ours anymore." Diana studied him. "It's more than that, isn't it? He thinks I'm here because of you, because we're—" She faltered. "Because we're involved." Adrien's jaw tightened. He moved closer, taking her hands in his. "I want you in my life, Diana. Personally, professionally, both. But if the professional side is making this harder for you—" "No." She shook her head quickly. "I love this job. I just need to know you believe in me." "I believe in you more than you know," he said softly, kissing her knuckles. "Give me time. Harold will come around." But Harold didn't come around. If anything, his campaign of quiet hostility intensified. And as weeks passed, Adrien became harder to reach. Cross Industries was on the cusp of a massive acquisition, and Adrien's attention was consumed by negotiations. His absences left Diana alone, navigating the minefield Harold had laid. Then one night, her assistant Jessica called her into the office after hours. Jessica's voice was trembling. "I thought you should know. Mr. Blackwood was in your office. He stayed almost an hour. He left with a folder." Diana's blood ran cold. On her desk was the confidential proposal she'd been developing for a sustainable tech client, something revolutionary, something that could put Cross Industries ahead by years, if Harold had tampered with it. By the time she reached Adrien's penthouse that night, her anger was barely contained. She found him on the balcony, shoulders tense, a glass of wine in his hand. "We need to talk," she said, her voice sharp against the quiet hum of the city below. Adrien turned, and the exhaustion in his eyes startled her. "This is about Harold?" "It's about sabotage. He was in my office tonight, Adrien. He's not just resisting me, he's trying to destroy me." Adrien set his glass down slowly, the line of his jaw hardening. "That's a serious accusation." "It's a serious situation," she snapped. "He sees me as a threat, not just to his position, but to his hold on you." For a long moment, Adrien said nothing. Then his shoulders sagged and his voice was low. "There are things about my past, about how I built this company, that Harold knows. Things I've kept buried." Diana's breath caught. "What kind of things?" "The kind that could destroy everything if they came to light. He's used them to keep me in check for years." Her chest tightened with both fear and resolve. "So he's blackmailing you." Adrien's eyes met hers, heavy with guilt. "I can't let him drive you away, but if he forces me to choose—" Diana's heart twisted. She had stepped into Adrien's kingdom only to find it built on shadows, and now the walls were closing in. "What do we do?" she whispered. Adrien's answer was quiet but steel-edged. "We fight. Together." What Diana didn't cue. Now, what neither of them knew was that Harold Blackwood had already set the trap, and the spring was about to snap. The storm struck without warning. Diana arrived at Cross Industries one Friday morning, coffee in hand, rehearsing her pitch for a new client that could change everything. The lobby buzzed with its usual rhythm of hurried assistants and polished executives. But something was off. Eyes turned toward her as she entered, not with admiration or recognition, but with discomfort. Averted gazes, whispered murmurs. A chill rippled through her spine. When she reached her office, the truth revealed itself like a guillotine blade. 2 uniformed security guards stood waiting at her desk. And there, sitting behind her desk as though he already owned it, was Harold Blackwood. He wore the smirk of a man who had been waiting for this moment. "Ms. Vale," one guard said briskly, "please gather your personal belongings. You're being terminated, effective immediately." The world tilted. "On whose authority?" Diana demanded. Mine, Harold said, stepping forward with a folder in his hand, the smugness in his voice sharp enough to cut glass. We've conducted an internal investigation. You've been selling company secrets to our competitors. That's absurd. Her voice was steady, but her heart hammered against her ribs. I would never. Harold opened the folder with theatrical calm and spread out printed emails across her desk. These suggest otherwise. Confidential information sent from your account to Morrison Tech. Dates, signatures, everything in order. Diana leaned forward, scanning the documents. Her stomach dropped. They looked real, down to her digital signature, but she had never written them. These are fabricated, she said firmly, though her voice was thinner than she intended. Someone set me up. Security footage shows you working late on the nights these emails were sent, Harold continued smoothly. I'm afraid the evidence is damning, and Mr. Cross has already been informed. He agrees that your immediate termination is necessary. The floor seemed to collapse beneath her. Adrien? The man who had whispered she was his future, the one who promised to fight with her? Had he really abandoned her so easily? I need to call him, Diana said, reaching for her phone. That won't be necessary. Harold's smirk deepened. Your access to all company systems has been revoked. He gestured, and the guards stepped closer. Security will escort you out. The walk of shame was excruciating. Colleagues peeked over cubicles, some with pity, others with suspicion, all too afraid to speak. Diana forced herself not to cry, not to crumble, as she packed the few belongings that remained in her office. A photo of her parents, a fountain pen, the framed award for the Harrison campaign that now felt like a cruel reminder. The elevator ride down stretched like an eternity. When the doors opened to the lobby, the guards marched her through the polished marble like she was a criminal. The city air outside was heavy with drizzle, and for the first time in months, Diana felt the weight of absolute ruin. She tried calling Adrien again and again, his personal line, his assistant, even the general switchboard. Every call went unanswered. It was as if she had been erased from his life in the space of a single morning. For 3 days, Diana hid in her apartment, anger warred with grief. She replayed every moment, every kiss, every whispered promise, and wondered how she had been so blind. She had been foolish enough to believe she could step into Adrien's world and not get burned. On the 4th day, she forced herself out of bed, showered, dressed in professional clothes that now felt like armor she no longer deserved. She sat in a coffee shop, laptop open, scanning job boards with growing despair. Her reputation was in tatters. Word had already spread. Whispers of corporate espionage clung to her like rot. No reputable firm would touch her. That was when a shadow fell across her table. A woman slid into the seat opposite, her auburn hair cut short, her brown eyes sharp and knowing. She carried the air of someone who had seen too much and trusted too little. Diana Vale? She asked. Diana looked up wearily. Do I know you? No, the woman said, leaning forward. My name is Vanessa Chen. I'm an investigative journalist with the Financial Tribune, and I think you're in serious trouble. Diana laughed bitterly. You think? Vanessa's gaze didn't waver. What if I told you, you're not the first, that Harold Blackwood has done this before, 3 times in fact, each time to an executive who threatened his power, each time with fabricated evidence, and each time he buried them so deep they never recovered. Diana froze. Despite her skepticism, something in Vanessa's voice, a mix of certainty and urgency, cut through the fog of her despair. Why are you telling me this? Because, Vanessa said, sliding a tablet across the table, you might be different. You're not just another executive. You're the woman Adrien Cross fell in love with, and that makes you more dangerous than you realize. Diana's throat tightened. Adrien doesn't love me. If he did, he wouldn't have let this happen. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. What if he doesn't know the whole truth? What if Harold showed him evidence so convincing that he had no choice but to believe? And what if Adrien himself is trapped, manipulated by the man he trusts most? For the first time since that brutal morning, hope flickered in Diana's chest. Small, fragile, but there. Vanessa leaned closer. I can't prove it yet, but with your help I can. Together we can expose Harold Blackwood. We can clear your name, and we can tear down the kingdom he's built on lies. Diana stared at the journalist, her pulse quickening. She thought of Jessica, of the loyal colleagues who had watched in silence as she was dragged out. Pieces of a possible fight back began to form. Her life had already been destroyed. She had nothing left to lose. But what Vanessa was offering wasn't just revenge, it was war. The war began in whispers. Diana sat across from Vanessa Chen in the flickering light of a late-night diner, the smell of stale coffee and fried onions pressing into the air. A folder lay open between them, filled with timelines, suspicious financial transfers, and names of executives who had mysteriously fallen before her. Each page was another nail in Harold Blackwood's coffin, yet the weight of it all pressed heavily on her chest. "This isn't just sabotage," Vanessa said, her eyes burning with conviction. "This is a pattern. He's built an empire within Adrien's empire, quiet, invisible, but deadly. And every time someone threatened him, he cut them down." Diana's fingers traced the edge of the folder. She thought. She found Adrien in his office, slumped over his desk, a glass of whiskey untouched beside him. The man who had once radiated power looked broken, the weight of a kingdom pressing down on his shoulders. "Adrien," she said softly. His head lifted and the pain in his eyes nearly undid her. "Diana, how did you get in here?" "I still have friends in this building," she replied. "People who believe the truth." He rose slowly, as though every movement cost him. "I don't know what to believe anymore. Harold showed me everything. Emails, footage. It looked real, too real, but my heart kept telling me it couldn't be you." Her throat tightened. "Your heart was right." She stepped forward, laying the folder on his desk. "Harold has been destroying people for years, not just me. Thomas Green, Sarah Kim, James Morrison. He ruined them all, and he almost ruined you." Adrien's trembling hands opened the folder. He scanned the evidence, server logs, testimony, hidden patterns. His breath grew uneven, his face paling with each page. Finally, he dropped into his chair, pressing his hands over his eyes. "My God," he whispered. "What have I done? I let him turn me against you. I should have trusted you. I should have—" Diana crossed the room and knelt before him, taking his face in her hands. "You were manipulated by someone you trusted, just like I was. But Adrien, this doesn't have to be the end. We can still fight, together." When he lowered his hands, tears shimmered in his green eyes. "Can you ever forgive me?" Instead of answering, Diana kissed him, fierce, desperate, filled with months of pain and longing. It was a kiss that forgave and demanded, that promised love, but warned of battles still ahead. The next morning, Adrien called an emergency board meeting. The room pulsed with tension as Harold Blackwood strode in, confident as ever. He didn't notice the extra chairs until Vanessa. Chen entered, flanked by Jessica and two of the wronged former executives. Murmurs erupted around the long mahogany table. Adrien sat at the head, his expression carved from stone. "Gentlemen, ladies, thank you for coming. We have matters of integrity to discuss." Diana's heart pounded as Vanessa laid out the evidence, slide after slide revealing Harold's years of deception. The forged emails, the falsified financials, the testimonies. Every detail was a dagger, each word peeling back the mask Harold had worn for decades. At first, Harold sneered. Then his smirk faltered. And finally, as the board members' murmurs rose into outrage, his composure cracked. "You think you can do this without me?" he snarled at Adrien. "You wouldn't have an empire without the skeletons I buried for you." The room froze. Adrien's jaw clenched, but his voice was steady. "Maybe I wouldn't, but I'd rather lose everything than let you destroy one more life." Security entered. Harold Blackwood was escorted out of the company he had poisoned, his protests echoing down the hallway like the fall of a giant. The aftermath was both vindication and rebirth. Diana was reinstated, not just to her position, but with a promotion, her name now synonymous with resilience. Her reputation in the industry, once smeared, was cleared with a vengeance. The employees who had doubted her now whispered respect. But the greatest vindication was Adrien. Weeks later, in the quiet of his penthouse, he stood with her by the window where they had first kissed. The city glittered below, but his eyes were on her alone. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Diana Vale," he said, voice trembling with emotion. "You saved my company, my sanity, and my faith in love. You've shown me what true partnership means, not just in business, but in life. Will you marry me?" Tears blurred her vision as she whispered, "Why?" She slipped the ring onto her finger, and she knew that this wasn't just an ending. It was a beginning, a new life, forged not in fairy tales, but in fire and survival. Yet as they held each other, Diana caught Vanessa's eyes from across the room. The journalist's expression was warm, but there was something else, something almost wary. Later, Vanessa would tell her, "Harold was only part of the shadow. There are deeper secrets buried in Cross Industries, and if those ever surface, this war might only be the beginning." Diana's heart clenched, but her hand found Adrien's. Whatever storm still lingered on the horizon, she knew this. She was no longer facing them alone.